The clash of steel rings out across the battlefield as two warriors collide, their movements a blur of speed and precision, their bodies encased in suits of armor that seem almost alive under the sun. These aren't just pieces of metal strapped together, they're masterworks of art and engineering, forged to inspire fear in enemies and reverence in allies. But what if I told you these legendary samurai armors held secrets far beyond their battlefield prowess? Hidden beneath the lacquered plates and silk cords lie mysteries steeped in spiritual power, rituals lost to time, and symbols meant to channel forces most of us can barely comprehend. This isn't just armor, it's a sacred vessel, a bridge between the warrior and the divine. Think about it. Why would a culture so deeply connected to honor and tradition pour such intricate care into every fold of leather, every twist of cord, every brushstroke of lacquer? The answer goes deeper than mere protection. These suits were believed to carry the soul of the samurai, infused with prayers for victory, charms against death, and even the whispers of ancestors. Some armors were said to glow with an otherworldly light in battle, or to emit sounds like distant chanting when struck. Were these just legends, or did the samurai know something we've forgotten? Today, we're stepping into a world where history and myth intertwine, unraveling the hidden lore behind these iconic suits. From the sacred materials chosen by master craftsmen to the secret rituals performed before battle, we'll uncover how samurai armor became so much more than just a tool of war. By the end, you'll see these legendary warriors and their armor in a light you've never imagined. So ready your curiosity like a samurai readying their sword, because we're about to dive into the shadows of history, where every rivet tells a story and every symbol holds a power waiting to be understood. To understand the sacred power woven into samurai armor, we must travel back over 1,000 years to Japan's Heian period. Picture this, a time when mounted archery dominated the battlefield, where warriors needed protection that allowed fluid movement as much as it deflected arrows. The earliest armor, known as Yoroi, wasn't just forged for survival, it was a canvas where warfare met spirituality. Craftsmen layered iron scales with silk and leather, binding them not just with cords but with prayers. Each material was chosen as carefully as a shrine selects its sacred objects. Lacquer wasn't merely a waterproof coating, it was a ritual offering believed to seal protective spirits into the armor's very fibers. What's fascinating is how these early designs reveal a duality functionality married to divine purpose. Take the Sane Eater, those curved plates along the torso. Their overlapping design wasn't just about stopping blades, it mirrored the layered petals of a lotus, a Buddhist symbol of resilience and rebirth. Even the armor's colors held meaning, deep blues invoking the tranquil power of the ocean, crimson echoing the life force of the sun. This wasn't random decoration. Warriors and artisans alike whispered that certain hues could sway the favor of the gods. Then came the shift from battlefield tool to sacred artifact. As samurai rose in social rank, their armor became a vessel for lineage and legend. Families commissioned suits embedded with hidden motifs, cranes for longevity, dragons for unyielding strength, each symbol a silent prayer passed down through generations. Some helmets bore fearsome mengu masks, not just to terrify enemies, but to channel the ferocity of Shinto spirits. There are accounts of daimyo refusing to wear any armor not consecrated by monks, believing unblessed metal would attract misfortune like a lightning rod. The spiritual weight of these designs becomes even clearer when you examine the rituals surrounding them. Before battle, samurai would often purify their armor at shrines, as if preparing not just a tool but an extension of their soul. There's a chilling record from the 12th century describing a warrior whose armor reportedly hummed before an ambush, a sound witnesses claimed resembled distant temple bells. Was it superstition, perhaps? But in a world where the line between the physical and the unseen was thin as rice paper, these beliefs shaped history as much as any sword stroke. What began as pragmatic protection transformed into something almost alchemical, a fusion of metal and mysticism where every stitch and scrollwork carried intention. By the time the Heian period gave way to the Kamakura era, you couldn't separate the samurai from the sacred essence of their armor. It wasn't just worn, it was inhabited. And that changes how we see every battle, every legend, every relic left behind. Because if armor could hold a soul, what else might history have misunderstood? Among the most haunting beliefs of the samurai was the idea that their armor could become a living guardian, what they called Tamashi Yoroi, or spirit armor. This wasn't just poetry. Warriors truly believed that through sacred rituals, their suits could absorb fragments of ancestral will, divine energy, even the echoes of fallen comrades. Picture a helmet passed down through generations, its iron scuffed with decades of battles. To the samurai, those marks weren't just damage. They were a ledger of victories whispered into the metal by unseen hands. The rituals to awaken this spiritual potential were elaborate. Before donning his armor, a warrior might purify himself under a waterfall, the icy water sharpening his focus as much as cleansing his body. Then came the Yoroi Kazen, where a priest or the samurai himself would trace symbols onto the armor's interior with vermilion ink swirling kanji for protection or courage, hidden where only the wearer would know. Some clans went further, sealing strands of hair from revered ancestors between the armor's layers, believing the physical remnant could tether their spirit to the battlefield. There are scrolls that describe warriors feeling an unnatural warmth radiating from their chest plates during combat, as if something beyond flesh and blood shared their heartbeat. Communication with these spirits took eerie forms. Before critical battles, samurai would sometimes spend nights seated before their armor in meditation, offering rice wine and reciting verses to awaken its dormant energy. The most devout claimed to hear faint replies, a metallic creak like a whisper, or dreams where shadowy figures corrected their sword techniques. One account from the Sengoku period tells of a general whose armor reportedly grew heavier the night before a trap, an unspoken warning he credited with saving his life. Skeptics might dismiss these as nerves or superstition, but consider this. In an era where battles were often decided by split-second instincts, perhaps these rituals sharpened a warrior's subconscious awareness, tying intuition to the divine. The spiritual bond went both ways. Just as armor could protect its wearer, it demanded respect in return. To neglect maintenance was an insult to the spirits within. Rust was seen as a literal sickness of the soul. There's a famous tale of a disgraced samurai who abandoned his damaged armor after a retreat, only to be haunted by phantom clanking footsteps until he recovered and ritually burned the suit to release its trapped anguish. Even in death, the connection endured. Many wills specified how armor should be enshrined or destroyed to prevent restless spirits from lingering. What's chilling is how modern discoveries hint at truths beneath the legend. Scientists examining centuries-old armor have found traces of organic matter, dried blood, plant fibers embedded in crevices, suggesting some rituals left physical evidence. And those eerie sounds warriors reported, lacquer curing over decades can subtly contract, creating faint pops and groans that mimic human murmurs. Whether divine or psychological, one thing's certain, to the samurai, their armor wasn't just equipment. It was a pact, a silent dialogue between the living, the dead, and forces no sword could pierce. Hidden within the intricate folds of samurai armor, symbols whispered secrets only the initiated could read. Dragons coiled around shoulder plates weren't mere decoration. They were declarations of power, their serpentine bodies embodying the samurai's connection to the primal forces of water and storm. According to legend, certain dragon-adorned suits were said to hiss when struck by rain, as if the creature within stirred to life. Then there were the phoenixes, their wings etched into breastplates with feathers so finely detailed they seemed to shimmer. These weren't just symbols of rebirth, They were bold proclamations that the wearer would rise again, even from the ashes of defeat. Take the cherry blossom, perhaps the most misunderstood motif. To outsiders, it might appear delicate, even out of place on battle-worn armor, but the samurai saw deeper. Each petal represented the fleeting nature of life, a reminder that beauty and death were intertwined. Warriors who wore this emblem often did so as a pledge to fall with grace, their lives blooming brightly but briefly for their lord. There's a haunting account of a 16th century general who scattered actual cherry blossoms from his saddle before charging into hopeless battles, his armor engraved with the flower's image. To his enemies, it was a poetic gesture. To his men, it was a sacred vow. Some symbols served as silent warnings. The horned, oni masks on helmets weren't just terrifying visages. They were spiritual wards believed to repel evil spirits and cowardice alike. Families with ties to Shinto shrines often incorporated zigzag, lightning patterns called inazuma along the armor's seams. These weren't random designs. They invoked the god Raijin's protection, turning the suit into a conduit for divine fury. There are records of enemies freezing mid-charge upon spotting these patterns, as if fearing the armor itself might summon a storm. But perhaps the most profound symbols were the hidden ones. Inside a helmet's brim, a tiny turtle might be carved unseen in battle yet radiating longevity. Under layered cords, a lotus could bloom in lacquer, its message of purity known only to the wearer. Even the knots tying the armor together held meaning, their specific configurations signaling clan allegiances or secret alliances. To the untrained eye, these details might seem trivial. But to a samurai, they transformed his armor into a silent language speaking of honor, destiny, and the unseen forces guiding his blade. What's remarkable is how these symbols transcended mere superstition. They shaped behavior. A warrior clad in phoenix motifs fought with reckless courage, knowing his legend would outlive him. One adorned with dragons moved with calculated precision, mirroring the creature's wisdom. The armor didn't just protect the body, it forged the samurai's identity, whispering to friend and foe alike that this was no ordinary fighter, but a soul armored in myth. And that understanding changes how we see every surviving suit today. Because when you stand before a display of ancient samurai armor, you're not just looking at metal and silk. You're reading a story, one etched in symbols that still pulse with meaning centuries later. Even among the sacred and storied armors of the samurai, few legends chill the blood like that of Minamoto no Yoshitsune's cursed suit. The brilliant but doomed general who led the Minamoto clan to victory in the Genpei War before being betrayed and driven to suicide, left behind more than just a legacy of military genius. His armor became a vessel for his restless spirit. After his death in 1189, whispers began of warriors who donned his iconic black lacquered yoroi only to meet sudden, violent ends. Some claimed the armor refused to be worn by anyone unworthy, its cords tightening like vengeful hands around the throats of impostors. Others swore it emitted a faint metallic groan at night, as if Yoshitsune himself still paced the halls of his ruined fortresses. Historical records add eerie weight to these tales. The Azuma Kagami, a 13th century chronicle, describes a retainer who secretly took Yoshitsune's armor from a shrine only to perish weeks later in a freak training accident, his body found pinned beneath his own horse. Centuries later, during the Edo period, a daimyo displayed the suit in his castle as a war trophy. Within a year, his lineage was shattered by famine and infighting, leading priests to declare the armor yoki, a vessel of malignant energy. Even modern attempts to preserve it have been plagued by mishaps. In 1923, a Kyoto museum curator cataloging the pieces reported hearing a blade being drawn behind him in an empty room. The next morning, every display case in the hall was found shattered, except the one holding Yoshitsune's helmet. But the most unsettling accounts aren't confined to history books. Hikers near Harazumi, where Yoshitsune took his life, still report glimpsing a shadowy figure clad in tattered black armor near moonlit streams. In 2011, a film crew documenting samurai ruins captured what appears to be a humanoid shape moving through fog, its silhouette unmistakably crowned by the distinctive shikoro neck guards of Yoshitsune's era. Paranormal investigators who analyzed the footage noted an anomaly. The figure's shadow stretches in the wrong direction, as if cast by a light source that wasn't there. What makes this legend endure isn't just the ghost stories, it's the tragic irony woven into the curse. Yoshitsune's armor was meant to embody loyalty and strategic brilliance, yet it became a prison for his bitterness against the brother who betrayed him. Perhaps that's why some scholars argue the curse isn't supernatural at all, but a psychological weapon. To wear the armor is to invite comparison with one of history's greatest tacticians, a burden that could shake any warrior's confidence. Or maybe, just maybe, the metal remembers. When the wind howls through the valleys of Harizumi, there are those who still hear the whisper of a man who refused to let even death strip him of his armor or his rage. The master armorers of feudal Japan, the katchū-shi, weren't just craftsmen, they were keepers of sacred secrets, blending metallurgy with mysticism in ways that modern science still struggles to replicate. Picture a workshop lit by the glow of charcoal fires, where every hammer strike was timed to the rhythm of chanting monks. These artisans didn't forge armor, they conducted rituals, beginning each suit with purification rites usually reserved for temple grounds. Before touching iron, they'd fast for days, their hands scrubbed with salt and prayer, because they believed impurity in the craftsman meant weakness in the metal. Some clans even required armorers to wear white robes, symbolizing their role as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. The process itself was a dance of precision and devotion. Take the folding of steel, a technique often associated with swords, but equally vital for armor. Layers of iron and carbon-rich tamahagane steel were heated, pounded, and folded dozens of times, not just for strength, but to weave spiritual resilience into the metal's very grain. Ancient scrolls describe master armorers whispering sutras into the folds, their breath carrying blessings into the glowing steel. The most revered workshops kept kettle spirits, small shrines where they offered sake to the forge's fire, believing the flames housed a kami that guided their hammers. But perhaps the most haunting lost technique was the creation of neuritate lacquer. Unlike standard lacquer, which could take months to cure, these masters developed a method where the coating hardened in days yet remained flexible for decades. The secret, a forbidden ingredient, human hair ash mixed into the resin by moonlight. Family records speak of armorers saving locks from deceased warriors, burning them at new moon ceremonies, and stirring the ashes into the lacquer to bind the wearer's armor to their ancestors. Modern chemists have confirmed traces of keratin in antique samples, but the exact recipe died with its last practitioners. Why did such profound knowledge vanish? War played its part. Entire schools of armorers were wiped out during the Sengoku period's endless battles, but the deeper truth lies in the katchū-shi's oath of silence. Techniques were passed orally, often through enigmatic poems that only made sense to initiates. An apprentice might spend years grinding pigments before being trusted with the chant that aligned a helmet's rivets to celestial patterns. When Japan modernized in the Meiji era and samurai traditions faded, these whispered teachings dissolved like mist. Today, a handful of historians and blacksmiths pore over fragmented scrolls, trying to reconstruct what was lost. They've managed to recreate the look of ancient armor, but not its soul. X-rays reveal inexplicable density variations in original pieces, pockets where the metal seems almost alive. One restorer described working on a 15th-century cuirass that emitted a faint, resonant hum when struck, as if the iron still remembered its maker's songs. The greatest tragedy isn't that we've lost the methods, it's that we've forgotten the world where such magic was possible. For certain samurai clans, armor wasn't just protection, it was a home. a dwelling place for ancestors whose presence could be felt in the creak of aged leather, the faint scent of ancient incense clinging to the lacquer, the way a helmet might seem to tilt slightly toward you in the firelight as if listening. The Ei clan of Hikone kept meticulous records of their heirloom armor's behavior, noting how the famed red demon suit would sometimes shift positions overnight in its storage chest, the sleeves appearing to have moved as if the long-dead warrior within had crossed his arms in disapproval. One particularly chilling entry describes a retainer entering the armory to find every piece of the clan's oldest suit standing upright despite having been laid flat the previous evening, the ghostly echo of marching boots still hanging in the air. These weren't mere ghost stories, they were a fundamental part of clan identity. The Date family of Send, I believed their ancestral armor housed the collective wisdom of past generations. Before major battles, commanders would gather around the ancient suits as if holding council with invisible advisors. There's a 17th century account of Date Masamune halting an entire march because his great-grandfather's armor emitted 3 distinct clicks during a ritual inspection, a sign interpreted as warning against an ambush ahead. Sure enough, scouts later found enemy forces concealed in the valley below. Was it coincidence, or did generations of warriors truly leave some imprint on the metal they once wore? Some clans took this belief to extraordinary lengths. The Shimazu of Satsuma practiced what they called Yoroi Katsugi, a ritual where the eldest son would wear his father's armor for 3 days after the patriarch's death, believing the spirit needed time to transition from body to steel. Servants reported hearing muffled sobs coming from empty helmets during this period, though no living person stood near them. Even maintenance became sacred. Polishing wasn't just preservation, but a form of spiritual communion. The Matsudera clan's records specify exact chants to recite while oiling each joint, phrases modern linguists recognize as fragments of 1,000-year-old funeral dirges. Perhaps the most unsettling evidence comes from battlefield accounts. During the Shimabara Rebellion of 1638, a wounded retainer of the Nebshima clan swore he saw the ghostly form of his great-uncle step out of a discarded suit of armor to deflect a spear thrust meant for him. Years later, that same retainer would claim the armor saved him again, this time by letting out an unearthly shriek as assassins approached his bedchamber, waking the entire household. The suit remains enshrined in a Nagasaki temple to this day, where caretakers insist its lacquer still bleeds rust-red tears every year on the anniversary of its original wearer's death. What modern science dismisses as pareidolia or the power of suggestion, these clans understood as sacred reality. To them, armor wasn't inanimate, it was sleeping. And when bloodline or crisis called, the ancestors within would stir once more, their presence as tangible as the iron embracing their descendants. In a world where family meant everything, even death couldn't break a samurai's duty to protect his own. The armor simply became the vessel that made eternity possible. The legends whisper of a metal darker than night, forged not with water or oil, but with blood. They called it chaitsu, the iron of sacrifice, and its creation was said to be the most forbidden art of the samurai armorers. According to scrolls hidden by the Abe clan, master smiths would slit their palms over glowing steel, letting their life essence mingle with the molten metal as they chanted verses from the Kojiki. The resulting plates weren't just physically impenetrable, they were spiritually charged, carrying the smith's very will into battle. One chilling account from the 14th century describes a suit that supposedly bled when its wearer was wounded, the iron weeping crimson tears until the warrior's final breath. Yet separating fact from folklore is like trying to grasp smoke. While no intact chaitsu armor survives today, metallurgists examining heirloom pieces have made unsettling discoveries. A breastplate in the Tokyo National Museum shows microscopic traces of hemoglobin in its crevices, though skeptics argue it could be centuries of battlefield splatter. More compelling are the records of the Taikta clan's secret forge, where apprentices reportedly swore oaths never to reveal the red quenching technique. Their notes speak of quenching hot metal in a liquid that steamed unnaturally, leaving a coppery scent clinging to the workshop for days. Was this blood? Or simply iron-rich mineral water, its properties exaggerated into myth? The psychological warfare angle can't be ignored. Imagine facing an enemy clad in armor rumored to contain the spirits of vanquished foes, each rivet a tomb, each plate singing with the echoes of the dead. The Oda clan actively spread tales that their general's black lacquered armor contained the blood of executed prisoners, a calculated terror tactic. But perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from an unlikely source: poetry. The warlord Yusuke Kenshin wrote of gifting a vassal armor, forged with winter's cruelty and my own veins offering, a line historians still debate. Was this metaphor or confession? Modern attempts to recreate Chaitsu yield eerie results. A Kyoto blacksmith following oral traditions produced a plate that, when struck, emitted a sound uncannily like a human groan. Spectral analysis revealed strange density fluctuations resembling organic patterns, though scientists caution this could be impurities in the ore. Meanwhile, in the mountains of Gifu, an elderly priest keeps what he claims is the last known Chaitsu fragment, a thumb-sized piece passed down through his family. He refuses all testing, saying the metal grows warm to the touch during the autumn equinox, when ancestral spirits walk closest to the living world. What's undeniable is how deeply the myth permeated samurai culture. Whether literal or symbolic, Chaitsu represents the ultimate fusion of warrior and weapon, where protection came not just from skill or steel, but from the terrifying belief that some armor didn't just protect the body, it housed the soul. And in the heat of battle, that belief might have been the most powerful metal of all. Beneath the lacquered elegance of samurai armor lay a shadowy world of concealed lethality, hidden compartments whispering of deception and last resorts. While the outer surfaces gleamed with honor-bound symbols, the inner layers often harbored secrets that would make a ninja nod in approval. Take the wakadate, those seemingly decorative ridges along the torso plates. Many were hollow, designed to hold razor-thin, shikomi's way, blade spring-loaded daggers that could snap forward into the palm with a twist of the wrist. The Taikta clan's armorers took this further, crafting forearms guards with hidden channels that could silently dispense powdered monk should poison onto an enemy's blade during grappling, turning their own steel against them. Some concealments bordered on the cinematic. The notorious warlord Oda Nobunaga wore a bever-the-neck guard beneath his helmet, with a cunningly disguised compartment housing a silk scroll coated in tetrodotoxin. Historical accounts suggest he once ended a siege by accidentally dropping this scroll during negotiations, knowing his rival would unfurl it to read supposed terms of surrender. Within hours, the enemy commander lay dead from fingertip poisoning, his army thrown into disarray. Then there was the infamous Shino goat arm guard of the Shimazu clan, its bamboo-like segments actually containing thin lead tubes filled with blinding powder. One quick jerk of the wrist would rupture the seals, creating an instant smoke screen for escape or counterattack. Perhaps the most brilliant and chilling innovation was the Hisatsu no Cane, or temple bell. Certain elite helmets contained hollow crests that could hold a single folded prayer strip blessed by mountain ascetics. When burned during battle, these strips released hallucinogenic smoke derived from sacred herbs, creating confusion among enemy ranks. The Azai clan's last stand at Odoni Castle in 1573 features in chronicles where defenders suddenly moved with uncanny coordination while attackers stumbled as if drunk, an effect modern botanists attribute to datura-laced smoke mingling with the fog. But not all hidden weapons were physical. The strategic genius Taikta Shinjin perfected the art of Yoroi Densho, embedding battle plans directly into armor ornamentation. By arranging cord knots in specific numerical patterns or altering the spacing of shoulder plate rivets, He could silently communicate troop movements to officers during chaotic engagements. This technique reached its zenith at the Battle of Mikitagahara, where Shingen's seemingly disordered retreat lines mocked by the enemy were actually precise formations that suddenly inverted into a deadly pincer maneuver, all signaled through prearranged armor modifications. What's fascinating is how these secrets reflect the samurai's dual nature, their unwavering Bushido code coexisting with a pragmatic willingness to bend the rules when survival demanded it. Because in the end, armor wasn't just about defense or even spiritual protection. It was the ultimate chessboard where every hidden compartment held another gambit, every concealed blade a final move waiting to be played. And in the hands of a master, these secrets didn't just change battles, they rewrote history. Even the most sacred traditions of samurai armor could be twisted into instruments of deception when ambition overrode honor. Few moments prove this more chillingly than the night attack on the Sanjo Palace in 1159, when what should have been bonds of loyalty became threads in a deadly puppet show. The conspirators, led by Fujiwara no Nobayori and Minamoto no Yoshitomo, didn't just storm the palace, they weaponized the very symbolism of armor to lull their victims into false security. By dressing their forces in the identical white hitatere undergarments and armor lacing of the emperor's personal guard, they turned tradition into a Trojan horse. Imagine the horror as palace defenders hesitated mid-swing, recognizing the colors of allies only to realize too late that the familiar suits contained enemies. This wasn't mere disguise. The conspirators exploited the profound cultural weight behind armor's visual language. In an era where identifying crests and colors were as vital as swords, they manipulated perception itself. Historical accounts describe how some attackers even wore meticulously replicated helmets of specific generals, their faces hidden by folding shukoro neck guards to complete the illusion. The psychological impact was devastating. Court nobles reportedly froze in confusion as figures clad in trusted armor cut down their kin, the betrayal made more visceral by the sacred objects facilitating it. But the darkest innovation lay in what wasn't there. Survivors' testimonies mention certain attackers whose armor sounded hollow when struck, suggesting lightweight mockeries designed to mimic real suits without the protection. These weren't just fakes, they were blasphemies against the armorer's sacred craft, reducing spiritual vessels to cheap props for murder. Some scholars believe this incident spawned the later superstition of Karakuri Yoroi armor that looked authentic but brought catastrophic misfortune to wearers, as if the materials themselves resented their misuse. The aftermath rippled through centuries. The Terra clan, who later avenged the attack, instituted brutal new armor inspection rituals, including piercing random plates with arrows to test their authenticity. More hauntingly, the incident birthed the saying, Yoroi nai kokoro ari, armor has a heart, a warning that while metal could be forged, its true spirit couldn't be counterfeited without consequence. Perhaps that's why later betrayals like the Hanoji incident saw conspirators avoid armor deception entirely, opting instead for fire and surprise. Once the sanctity of those forged shells was broken, no warrior could ever look at a familiar suit without wondering what or who might truly lurk within. Among the most striking relics of samurai warfare are the onikabuto helmets sculpted into the snarling visages of demons, their exaggerated fangs and bulging eyes frozen in eternal rage. But these weren't just theatrical intimidation tactics. When a warrior donned such a mask, he wasn't merely disguising his humanity. He was invoking the primal fury of the Oni, the ogres of Japanese folklore who personified unchecked destruction. Historical accounts describe how certain clans, like the fierce warriors of the Satsuma domain, would commission helmets with hinged jaws that clacked rhythmically as the wearer charged into battle, creating an unholy percussion that made enemies flinch before the first sword stroke. The spiritual calculus behind these designs was dangerously complex. While the demonic imagery struck terror into opponents, it also flirted with attracting actual supernatural forces. Ancient armorers whispered of kabuto no Tamashi-era, a ritual where the helmet's interior cavity would house a sliver of bone from an executed criminal or a strand of hair from a notorious berserker, materials believed to tether the armor to genuine malice. Some chronicles tell of helmets that grew uncomfortably warm during combat, their lacquer bubbling as if the demonic visage was sweating with bloodlust. The warlord date Masamune's infamous blue demon helmet was said to emit a low, growling resonance when exposed to strong winds, a phenomenon his retainers attributed to the restless spirit bound within its iron frame. Yet the risks of channeling such power were no secret. Scrolls from the Muromachi period warn of warriors who became Oni Yoroi, their personalities warping over years of wearing demonic armor until they mirrored the cruelty of its visage. The Akashi clan's records contain a chilling entry about a samurai who began sleepwalking in full armor, his footsteps heavy as if something else was moving his body, only to wake with no memory, but with his hands stained in blood matching that of slaughtered livestock. Priests often performed exorcisms on heirloom helmets before battles, purifying them just enough to harness their fury without losing control. Perhaps the most revealing detail lies in how these helmets were treated after their wearer's death. Unlike regular armor passed down generations, Oni Kabuto were frequently buried separately or sealed in temples, their mouths stuffed with purification scrolls to silence the spirits within. Modern examinations of surviving examples reveal curious details: scorch marks around the eye holes on one specimen, another with interior scratches suggesting frantic clawing. Were these the remnants of rituals, or evidence that some helmets held forces even samurai couldn't fully command? The answer may lie in a faded prayer found tucked inside a 17th century mask, its ink blurred by what conservators insist is water damage, though the jagged fingerprints burned into the paper tell a different story entirely. History remembers the samurai as men, their armored silhouettes dominating battlefields and woodblock prints alike. But behind the lacquered masks and layered plates marched another kind of warrior, one history has tried hard to forget: the honor musher, the women who wore armor not as ceremonial garb but as battle dress. Take Tomo Gozen, whose legendary feats during the Genpei War were so extraordinary that chroniclers strained to reconcile her skill with their prejudices. Beautiful as a flower, fierce as a demon, they wrote, as if such duality required supernatural explanation. What they rarely described was her armor specifically crafted for a woman's frame, with tapered waist plates and shoulder guards that allowed fluid archery without sacrificing protection. The differences went beyond fit. Female armor often incorporated subtle but deliberate design choices overlooked by modern eyes. The sleeves of an honor musher's coat arm guards were typically lined with silk twice as thick as men's, not for comfort, but to prevent chafing that could slow the precise draw of a bowstring. Their Heidate thigh guards flared differently, accommodating the wider hips needed for stability during horseback archery. Even the helmet cords told a story, where men's shukoro neck guards were tied tightly to prevent obstruction. Women's versions often left deliberate slack, allowing them to shake loose their hair mid-battle, a psychological weapon as potent as any blade. Historical accounts describe enemies freezing at the sight of blood, streaked hair whipping behind a masked face, the juxtaposition of femininity and ferocity rupturing their focus. But preserving these masterpieces became a cultural battleground. After the Warring States period, as Confucian ideals tightened their grip on Japan, female armor faced systematic erasure. Some suits were deliberately masculinized, their waists widened with added plates, their delicate lacing replaced with heavier knots to obscure their true wearers. The Matsudaira clan's records contain a telling entry from 1682, ordering the destruction of an heirloom suit worn by a famous female retainer, deemed unseemly for the eyes of young lords. Ironically, this censorship preserved clues. X-rays of modified armor revealed telltale stitch marks where narrower waist plates were removed, and spectral analysis often detects traces of cosmetics in helmet padding, lip rouge mixed with resin to reinforce the lining. The greatest tragedy lies in what we've lost to silence. Scrolls from the Kamakura period reference entire schools of female armorers in Kyoto, their techniques guarded as closely as sword-smithing secrets. One fragmented text describes floating rivets that allowed breastplates to flex with breathing, a technology modern engineers have unsuccessfully tried to replicate. Perhaps most poignant are the personal touches left behind. In a hidden compartment of a suit attributed to Hangoku Gozen, conservators found a single dried camellia flower, its petals pressed between layers of washi paper inscribed with a poem, "Bloom brightly before the frost claims you." Not a plea for survival, but a vow to burn out rather than fade. These suits were more than equipment. They were declarations that honor and courage had no gender, wrapped in iron and silk. And every time we uncover another fragment of their story, we don't just restore history, we shatter the illusion that greatness ever wore just one face. Gold wasn't just decoration on a shogun's armor. It was a declaration of divine right. While lesser lords made do with ordinary lacquer, the Tokugawa shoguns cloaked themselves in kinji-nyori, a forbidden technique where artisans mixed powdered gold into the resin, creating a surface that shimmered like sunlight on water. But this wasn't mere opulence. The process was a sacred rite, performed only during the hour of the dragon between 7 and 9 in the morning, when Shinto priests chanted verses from the kojiki over the molten mixture. To apply gold lacquer without these rituals was punishable by forfeiture of land, even for daimyo, because in a world where the shogun was styled as the Tenka no Oni, the demon ruler of the realm, his armor had to radiate more than wealth, it needed to broadcast celestial authority. The exclusivity extended to every component. Only shogunate armor could incorporate shinchu, a red-tinged copper alloy smelted with gold and mercury, giving helmet crests an unearthly glow under torchlight. Blacksmiths forging these pieces worked in isolated foundries, their tools purified with salt and sake every new moon. Most chilling was the Kurogane no Shinpi, the secret of the black iron plates quenched not in water, but in the saliva of temple acolytes who'd fasted for 3 days, their mouths stuffed with sanctified rice paper to breathe purity into the metal. Surviving records from Edo Castle describe how these finished plates, when struck, produced a tone resembling a temple bell, a sound no other armor could replicate. Why such draconian bans? Because shogunate armor wasn't just protective gear, it was political alchemy. The Tokugawa understood that visual symbolism could crush rebellions before they started. When a regional lord knelt before the shogun and saw his own reflection warped in those golden plates, he wasn't just facing a man. He was confronting a system where even sunlight seemed to obey divine mandate. The psychological impact was calculated. After the Shimabara rebellion, inspectors found peasant soldiers who'd fled rather than face the shogun's golden-clad forces, later confessing they feared the armor itself would blind the impure. Yet the most potent secrets lay hidden. Inside the helmet's crown, priests would inscribe the shogun's secret Buddhist name in vermilion, a name even he wasn't permitted to know, believed to summon the protection of Fudo-myo-o, the wrathful deity of immovable resolve. The backplates often concealed compartments holding slips of paper from Ai's shrine, infused with the essence of Amaterasu, the sun goddess. To wear such armor was to become a living shrine, every step a procession. When the Meiji Restoration toppled the shogunate in 1868, the new government systematically destroyed these suits, melting down the gold and burning the lacquer, not just to reclaim wealth, but to sever the mystical link between ruler and ruled. Today, only fragments survive: a gilded shoulder plate in a Tokyo museum, a single golden rivet in a Kyoto temple collection. But if you stand close enough, they say, and the light hits just right, you can still see where the divine once touched the mortal world, and why mere men would kill to keep such power for themselves. To the samurai, death wasn't an end. It was a journey to the next battlefield, and like any warrior setting out on a perilous campaign, they refused to go unarmored. Across Japan's mist-shrouded hills, archaeologists have uncovered graves where skeletons still clutch rusted swords, their bodies encased in armor so meticulously arranged it's as if they expected to rise fighting. The Heian-era General Tara no Masakoto was said to have been buried seated in full regalia, his visor lifted so he could watch for enemies even in death. But these weren't mere displays of status. Every rivet left unpolished, every lace untied, they held meanings modern scholars are still deciphering. Take the Yoroi no Tamashizum, the ritual sealing of armor for burial. Chroniclers describe how mourners would deliberately leave one shoulder cord loose, symbolizing the warrior's readiness to rejoin the living if called. Helmets were often placed slightly askew, not from carelessness, but to mimic the angle of a head turning to listen for distant war drums. Most haunting are the accounts of Kyūbai Jiken, where decapitated warriors were buried with their heads carefully repositioned atop their armor-clad bodies, the neck joints packed with strips of scripture to guide their souls through the chaos of the afterlife. A 12th century grave in Kamakura revealed one such skeleton, its vertebrae threaded with tiny bronze beads spelling out a sutra, each bead a stepping stone across the river of souls. But why risk burying such valuable armor? The answer lies in the Shinigami no Yoroi, the death god's armor. Samurai believed the journey to the next world swarmed with malevolent spirits eager to claim warrior souls. A suit of armor served as both shield and passport, its crests proving lineage to divine ancestors who might vouchsafe passage. Some clans took this further, interring warriors with miniature musha ningyo dolls clad in identical armor, decoys to confuse hungry ghosts. The Azuchi Momoyama period even saw warlords buried with kagemusha armor, duplicate suits designed to absorb any curses meant for the true occupant of the grave. Modern technology has unveiled secrets these warriors never intended us to see. Ground-penetrating radar at a Kyoto burial mound revealed armor emitting anomalous electromagnetic pulses, later traced to iron plates alloyed with meteoritic metals. Materials ancient smiths believed carried the power of the heavens. Another excavation found lacquer chemically bonded with human blood proteins, suggesting some suits were literally sealed with the life force of grieving retainers. Yet many sites remain untouched, protected by enduring taboos. In 2015, workers near Sekigahara accidentally uncovered a burial only to rebury it immediately after tools began malfunctioning, and several crew members reported waking with identical nightmares of a figure in black armor standing at the foot of their beds. Perhaps the most profound discovery came from a humble farmer's field in Okayama. There, beneath a stone marked only with the kanji for loyalty, lay the perfectly preserved armor of a teenage Ashigaru foot soldier. His chest plate bore a crude carving of a sparrow, the soul's symbol in folk tradition, and clutched in his skeletal fingers was a note reading, "Wait for me among the cherry blossoms." This unknown boy, whose name history forgot, had been given a general's burial by comrades who saw not his rank but his spirit, and that may be the ultimate truth behind these sacred interments. For the samurai, armor wasn't just metal and memory. It was a promise that no warrior, no matter how humble, would face eternity alone. The fog rolls in thick over the fishing villages of Fukushima, carrying whispers older than the Tokugawa shogunate. Locals speak of shapes moving through the mist, silhouettes clad in armor that drips seawater, their helmets crooked as if battered by long-vanished waves. This is the Yurei Yoroi, the ghost armor of the Kaiko tsunami survivors, said to rise from the depths every year on the anniversary of that cataclysmic night in 1611. But these aren't just spectral apparitions, they're echoes of one of Japan's darkest hours when the sea swallowed entire armies whole. Historical records from Sendai Domain describe the disaster with chilling brevity. the ocean walked upon the land, and 1,400 warriors of Date Masamune vanished beneath its teeth. What the scrolls omit is the fate of their armor. Normally, samurai drowned in battle would be recovered for proper burial, but the tsunami's wrath left no bodies to reclaim. Instead, the suits became their coffins, dragging their wearers into the abyss with iron-weighted finality. Fishermen's tales from the Edo period tell of nets snagging on submerged helmets, only to slip free with a sound like muffled screaming. Some dredged up lacquered fragments crusted with barnacles, still reeking of salt and something darker sulfur, perhaps, or the iron tang of blood that refused to fade. Modern paranormal investigators have mapped the phenomenon with eerie precision. Thermal cameras along the coast routinely capture cold spots shaped like human figures, their outlines bristling with the distinct angles of shoulder guards and tassets. In 2019, a team from Tohoku University recorded audio near Matsukawara Lagoon. 37 seconds of metallic creaking, interspersed with guttural chanting later identified as a corrupted version of the Hanyashingyo Heart Sutra, a Buddhist prayer for the dead. The timing aligns with survivor accounts from 1611, which mention warriors singing hymns as the waves overtook them, their voices swallowed mid-verse. But the most unsettling evidence comes from those who have encountered the ghosts directly. A lighthouse keeper in Soma reported seeing a figure in full armor standing knee-deep in the surf one moonless night, its helmeted head slowly turning to follow his lantern's beam. When he waded closer, the figure dissolved into mist, leaving behind a single warped tsuba sword guard crusted with organisms that marine biologists swear shouldn't exist in these waters. Then there's the infamous security footage from Fukushima Daiichi's exclusion zone, where a silhouette in Heian-era armor was seen walking through radioactive ruins in 2016, a haunting anachronism that sparked whispers of the disaster awakening older, hungrier spirits. What makes the Tamashi Yoroi different from typical ghost stories is its tangible link to geology. The same tectonic forces that triggered the 1611 tsunami still strain beneath Fukushima today. Scientists now speculate that seismic activity might release trapped gases that are hallucinogenic, explaining the visions until you examine the armor fragments occasionally washed ashore. Their lacquer bears no modern pollutants, their silk lacing disintegrates upon contact with daylight, and their alloy composition matches no known smithing traditions. These shouldn't exist, and yet, like the warriors who wore them, they refuse to stay buried. Perhaps the most poignant detail lies in the local rituals meant to appease these spirits. Every April, villagers float miniature armor sets made of rice paper into the tide, each painstakingly inscribed with the names of lost samurai from centuries-old tax records. The papers dissolve before reaching the horizon, as if the ocean itself is consuming the offering. It's a tradition that blurs the line between memorial and exorcism, an acknowledgement that some wounds never fully heal and some armors never truly empty. Because in Fukushima, the past doesn't rest, it walks, it watches, and on certain mist-laden nights, it still expects its due. The workshop hums with an energy that feels almost ritualistic, modern hammers striking ancient alloys, lacquer brushes moving in patterns last seen 500 years ago. Across Japan, a handful of master craftsmen have dedicated their lives to resurrecting samurai armor using techniques that vanished with the fall of the shogunate. Their quest isn't just historical curiosity, it's a dialogue with ghosts. Take Kyoto-based armorer Hideki Miyajima, who spent 7 years reverse engineering a single Edo-period helmet. His breakthrough came when he discovered traces of crushed oyster shells in the original lacquer, a forgotten ingredient that gave the finish its eerie luminescence under moonlight. But when he replicated the formula, something unsettling happened. The helmet, left to cure in a temperature-controlled chamber, developed hairline cracks in the shape of kanji characters meaning silence. Miyajima insists it was a coincidence of drying patterns, his apprentices whisper otherwise. Other discoveries blur the line between craft and alchemy. In Nara, a team using medieval smelting techniques produced iron plates with a peculiar resonance. When struck, they emitted a harmonic tone matching frequencies used in Buddhist temple bells. X-rays later revealed microscopic voids in the metal, arranged in spiral patterns that shouldn't exist without modern precision tools. The smiths attributed to the tatarab method, where molten metal was stirred with charred bamboo rods in a figure-8 motion, a technique described in scrolls as weaving the breath of dragons. Skeptics argue physics explains the phenomenon, yet when one replica suit was displayed in a Tokyo museum, visitors reported hearing faint chanting near it during thunderstorms. The most controversial experiments involve katchū-shi, the lost art of blood-tempered armor. Following fragmentary texts, craftsmen in Kumamoto attempted quenching red-hot plates in a solution containing bovine blood plasma. The resulting metal developed a crimson patina within weeks, its surface mottled like aged skin. More disturbing were the temperature fluctuations. Infrared cameras recorded spots on the breastplate that warmed unpredictably, as if responding to unseen stimuli. The project was quietly shelved after nighttime security footage showed the armor's sleeves shifting position inside a locked display case. Perhaps the greatest revelation isn't about materials but intent. Modern recreations, no matter how precise, lack the spiritual weight of originals. As Miyajima concedes while examining a 500-year-old cuirass, we can replicate every stitch and rivet but not the 1,000 prayers hammered into it. The difference becomes stark when handling battle-worn antiques. Their dents and scratches seem to tell stories, while replicas feel eerily mute. Some artisans now incorporate period-correct rituals into their process, chanting sutras during forging or burying finished pieces in shrine grounds for months. The results are uncanny. One such suit, displayed in Osaka, made headlines when a visiting historian recognized its tattered silk cords as matching those in a 17th-century painting of a doomed general, a detail never documented in modern references. What these craftsmen are really rebuilding isn't just armor, but a worldview. Each lacquer layer that dries, each cord that tightens, brings us closer to understanding how the samurai saw their suits not as possessions but as partners in destiny. And sometimes, in the silence of the workshop, when the forge fires burn low and the shadows lengthen, it's easy to wonder if those ancient warriors might be watching, approving, judging, or perhaps waiting for someone worthy to wear their resurrected shells into battle once more. Sun Tzu's immortal words, "All warfare is based on deception," echoed through the smithies of Japan, where armor became more than protection. It was psychological theater. The Chinese strategists' principles didn't just influence battlefield tactics, they shaped the very metal-cladding samurai from neck to ankle. Take the Hara 8, a minimalist chest guard favored by scouts and raiders. Its sparse design wasn't born of poverty but calculation, by leaving limbs exposed, whereas tricked enemies into underestimating their speed, only to close distance with terrifying agility. This was Sun Tzu's appearing weak when strong made manifest, a lesson the Taikta clan weaponized at Mikitagahara, where lightly armored cavalry lured the heavier Oda forces into a killing zone before revealing their full strength. For shock troops, the inverse held true. The Omicron Yoroi, with its sweeping metal skirts and exaggerated shoulder plates, turned warriors into looming silhouettes, embodying Sun Tzu's doctrine of terrifying the enemy's spirit. When the Hojo clan's vanguard charged at Kawago in 1545, their black lacquered armor creaked like groaning timber, the sound amplified by hollow chambers in the shoulder guards, a deliberate auditory illusion that made 50 men sound like 500. Psychological dominance wasn't just about appearance, it was sensory overload. The Yusugi took this further, embedding copper strips in their helmets that hummed in high winds, producing an uncanny wail before engagements. Some designs weaponized Sun Tzu's emphasis on adaptability. The domaru, with its detachable sections, allowed warriors to shed weight mid-battle, shifting from fortress-like defense to lethal mobility as circumstances demanded. At Nagashino, Oda Nobunaga's gunners exploited this by targeting the hinges of take-to cavalry armor, knowing a single well-placed shot could turn an impenetrable suit into a rattling cage. Yet the ultimate fusion of strategy and craftsmanship might be the Yoroi Heian armor disguised as humble gourd carriers, worn by assassins infiltrating enemy camps. These suits folded inward, their true nature hidden until the moment of attack, embodying the art of war's most ruthless axiom: kill with the borrowed sword. The most brilliant applications blurred the line between armor and theater. During Toyotomi Hideyoshi's siege of Odawara, his engineers constructed wooden armor for decoy troops, hollow shells mounted on poles and moved by hidden ropes. From a distance, these puppets appeared as fresh reinforcements, their lacquer glinting convincingly in the sun. By the time defenders realized the ruse, Hideyoshi's real forces had already breached the walls. Centuries later, this same principle would resurface in World War Roman II, camouflage proof that Sun Tzu's wisdom, forged in ancient China and refined by samurai steel, transcends eras. Because the greatest armor isn't worn on the body, it's planted in the enemy's mind. Beneath the sweeping curves and intricate lacing of samurai armor lies a shadow war of symbols, cloaked messages woven into patterns so ordinary they escaped centuries of scrutiny. During the chaos of the Sengoku period, when alliances shifted like desert sands, certain armor designs became more than art. They were clandestine battle maps, rebellion manifestos, even dead-drop instructions for ninja operatives. Take the Kamen family crests adorning breastplates. While most displayed proud clan emblems, some hid subtle alterations. A missing petal in a chrysanthemum motif indicating betrayal, or extra waves in a Segei pattern signaling safe houses. The most infamous example, the Heian-era armor of Take-to Spies, its bamboo leaf patterning concealing a grid that, when overlaid with specific temple roof tiles in Kai province, pointed to hidden weapon caches. One particularly chilling discovery emerged in 2018, when researchers analyzing a suit worn by a minor daimyo in the Shimabara rebellion noticed irregularities in the Kiko hexagon patterning. Under ultraviolet light, sections of the lacquer fluoresced differently, not from aging, but because artisans had mixed crushed firefly abdomens into the resin to create invisible markers. When mapped across the armor's surface, these glowing points traced the coastline of Amakusa Island, pinpointing the rebel Christian samurai's last stronghold. Even the cords held secrets. Microscopic analysis revealed some laces contained strands of Catholic rosary threads, a death sentence if discovered during shogunate inspections. But the ultimate cipher may lie in the sewed shoulder guards of the Iga ninja clans. At first glance, their layered construction appears purely defensive. Yet preserved scrolls describe how certain plates could be disassembled into lockpicks or poison vials, while the stitching patterns encoded messages in Decode, a system where seemingly random embroidery knots corresponded to phonetic syllables. One recovered suit in Nara Museum bears a spine-chilling example. Its right-sewed interior stitching, when deciphered, reads, "The owl flies at moon death," a confirmed trigger phrase for an assassination plot against Oda Nobunaga. Modern scholars now suspect these hidden systems were far more widespread than previously assumed. X-rays of random hammer marks on helmets have revealed micro-etchings, minute scratches aligning into kanji when viewed from specific angles, likely used by sleeper agents to identify allies. Even the dreaded Mengu face masks may have served dual purposes. Spectral imaging on a specimen from Aizu shows the interior's rough texture isn't wear, but deliberately carved braille-like bumps spelling out coastal tide tables for amphibious raids. What makes these discoveries so revolutionary isn't just their craft, it's their implications. In an era where the wrong word meant decapitation, armor became the perfect medium for subterfuge. Its very sanctity made it above suspicion, its ornate details ideal for hiding subversion in plain sight. And that realization forces us to re-examine every surviving suit, every museum display. Because for every decoded message, there may be a dozen more still waiting silent witnesses to a shadow history where wars were fought not just with swords, but with symbols only the initiated could read. The silver screen and pixelated battlefields have long been obsessed with the eerie allure of cursed samurai armor. But how much of this modern myth-making stems from actual history? Take Masaki Kobayashi's 1965 masterpiece, Quaden, where a suit of armor springs to life, its hollow visor weeping blood as it hunts down descendants of a betrayed lord. This wasn't pure fantasy. The film drew direct inspiration from Edo period kaiden tales, particularly the story of Shuten Doji, where a discarded suit supposedly moved on its own to avenge its wearer's murder. Yet Hollywood and game studios often exaggerate the supernatural elements, turning nuanced spiritual beliefs into jump scares. The truth lies somewhere between folklore and fabrication. Ghost of Tsushima, praised for its historical accuracy in armor design, takes creative liberties with its ghost armor, a shrouded, nightmare-inducing suit that terrifies Mongol invaders. While no historical records describe armor literally striking fear into enemies' hearts, the psychological warfare angle rings true. Samurai did engineer their gear to unnerve opponents, from creaking shoulder guards to masks that distorted their voices into demonic growls. The game's artistic director admitted studying accounts of Ikazuchi no Katchū, thunder armor, helmets designed to amplify the wearer's battle cries into unnatural roars. Even Western media can't resist these legends. The Metal Gear Solid series features the Tengu troops, their armor fused mysteriously to their flesh, a nod to real samurai beliefs about armor absorbing its wearer's essence. Compare this to the 16th century diary of a Jesuit missionary describing a suit that reportedly clung like second skin to a dying warlord, requiring monks to ritually peel it away over 3 days. Modern storytellers amplify such anecdotes, but the seed of the idea that armor could become inseparable from identity comes straight from samurai spiritual codes. The darkest portrayals emerge in Japanese cinema. Takashi Miike's Blade of the Immortal shows cursed armor regenerating its wearer's wounds, a fantastical twist on historical Tamashi Yoroi, rituals where warriors believed ancestral spirits could heal minor injuries through embedded charms. More chillingly, the horror film Over Your Dead Body features a no-theater actor possessed by the spirit of a suit modeled after the real-life Kurokawa Kabuto, a helmet linked to 12 suspicious deaths since the Meiji era. Forensic analysis of the actual artifact revealed traces of mercury in its lacquer, a common preservative but one that coincidentally fueled supernatural rumors. What these adaptations grasp brilliantly is armor's cultural weight. When Nioh 2 depicts a villainous samurai whose armor drinks blood to sustain him, it's riffing on authentic Heian-era fears about yokai yoroi armor that fed on its wearer's corruption. Scrolls from the Muromachi period warn of suits grown heavy with sin, their plates allegedly darkening after atrocities. This moral dimension often gets lost in translation. Western games like Elden Ring portray cursed armor as purely malevolent, whereas traditional Japanese lore treats these objects as tragic, corrupted by human actions rather than inherently evil. The most faithful modern interpretation might surprise you. The Studio Ghibli film Princess Mononoke, the cursed samurai armor worn by Lady Eboshi's mercenaries isn't supernatural, it's a metaphor. Their rivets weep black sludge not from spells but from the greed of industrial warfare. This mirrors historical accounts of low-quality armor rushed into production during the Sengoku period, its shoddy materials literally decaying on the battlefield. Sometimes the real curse wasn't magic but human desperation clad in iron. These pop culture lenses, however distorted, keep an ancient dialogue alive. Every time a game lets players don armor that whispers forgotten battles, or a film shows a helmet turning toward the camera with empty menace, they're channeling a truth the samurai knew well, that the boundary between object and spirit was always thinner than a blade's edge. And perhaps that's why these stories endure, because deep down, we still suspect metal remembers. There's something unsettling about the way antique samurai armor groans in the silence of a museum, a sound like old bones stirring, the faintest protest of lacquer and leather resisting the weight of centuries. But what if those whispers weren't just the protests of aging materials? Across Japan, folklore pulses with accounts of armor that doesn't just creak, it communicates. The Yoroi no Ko, or armor's voice, was said to be a phenomenon where plates would emit inexplicable sounds, moans like distant wind, rhythmic clicks resembling coded messages, even sharp cracks as if snapping to attention. A 13th century scroll from Kamakura describes a sentry who abandoned his post after his helmet began humming an eerie tune moments before an enemy ambush. His punishment was lifted when investigators found the attack had indeed been planned for that hour. Modern collectors walk a fine line between skepticism and chilling first-hand encounters. Take Hiroshi Matsuda, a Kyoto-based historian who owns a 16th century Domaru cuirass. During a routine inspection, his team recorded metallic pops occurring at precise 5-minute intervals, a pattern that persisted even when the armor was isolated in a soundproof case. Infrared scans revealed no temperature fluctuations or structural stress to explain it. Then there's the case of a Sendai Museum's Sangu arm guards, which visitors claim produce a sound like rattling pebbles when no one is near. Security footage from 2019 shows the empty display vibrating subtly at 3:17 a.m., coinciding with the historical hour when their original wearer fell in battle. Coincidence, perhaps, but the museum now keeps a log of these occurrences, noting they intensify during typhoon season, when low-pressure systems roll in from the Pacific. Acoustics experts offer scientific theories: old lacquer contracting unpredictably, metal fatigue creating microfractures, even insect activity within layered cords. But some phenomena defy easy explanation. A famous suit in Aomori, once worn by a general who committed seppuku, allegedly emits a wet, gurgling noise resembling drowning when the humidity exceeds 80%. No corrosion or moisture damage has ever been found. Then there's the oni-faced helmet in Nagasaki that produces a sound like laughter when exposed to sudden light changes, a trait documented as far back as 1786. Local priests insist it's the trapped mirth of the warlord who wore it, a man known for grinning madly even in death. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the armorers themselves. Traditional katchū-shi craftsmen still practice the Kain no Kokoro ritual, tapping finished plates with a silver mallet and interpreting the resonance. A clear tone signifies purity, a dull thud warns of hidden flaws, but ancient texts describe masters who could hear deeper messages. A plate that sang like a nightingale might portend victory, while one that groaned like bending bamboo signaled impending betrayal. In 2012, a restoration team working on a Muromachi period helmet reported that its cheek guards produced dissonant notes when separated but harmonized perfectly when reunited, a metaphor, some suggest, for the samurai's belief in armor as an extension of the body's unity. Whether spiritual or scientific, these phenomena share a common thread: the insistence that armor retains echoes of its past. Modern attempts to replicate talking armor using period-accurate materials have failed to produce the same uncanny effects. There's a haunting intimacy to the idea that these silent sentinels of history might still have something to say if we're willing to listen closely enough. And in the quiet between the creaks and clicks, it's hard not to wonder what secrets they're straining to share across the gulf of centuries. Among the most persistent legends surrounding samurai armor is the claim that mercury was used to achieve its mirror-like polish, a deadly shortcut that supposedly drove countless warriors to madness. While this makes for a gripping tale, the truth is far more complex and revealing. Historical metallurgists have indeed found trace mercury deposits in some antique armor samples, but not where you'd expect. The toxic element wasn't used in polishing at all. Instead, it appears in the shakudo alloy mixes for decorative accents, where gold-mercury amalgam created the distinctive black and gold patina seen on elite helmets. This gilding technique, called niero, involved carefully heating the mercury until it evaporated, leaving pure gold behind, a process far less hazardous than the myth suggests. So where did the mercury madness stories originate? The answer lies in a tragic case of historical conflation. During the Edo period, several prominent daimyo did suffer neurological decline with symptoms resembling mercury poisoning, but their exposure came from a completely different source: fugu poison antidotes. Certain schools of medicine believed small, controlled doses of mercury could counteract the deadly blowfish toxin. The infamous case of Date Tsunemune, who grew increasingly erratic after surviving a fugu assassination attempt in 1660, perfectly illustrates this. His subsequent spiral into paranoia and violence was blamed on his armor's polish by superstitious retainers, when in reality, his court physicians had been feeding him mercury-laced antidotes for years. That said, some armor-related mercury dangers were very real. The Shomi school of metalworkers occasionally used mercury to test lacquer quality, dropping beads onto cured surfaces to check for imperfections. Prolonged exposure in poorly ventilated workshops likely caused tremors and hallucinations among some craftsmen, fueling the cursed armor legends. We even have records from Kumamoto Castle describing an armorer nicknamed Trembling Gyro, whose hands shook uncontrollably after decades of handling mercury-treated gold leaf. His condition was immortalized in a haunting ukiyo-e print showing him polishing a helmet, his distorted reflection staring back from the metal with demonic features. The most compelling evidence against widespread mercury polishing comes from the armor itself. Modern spectroscopy reveals that the brilliant luster of top-tier suits was achieved through painstaking megaki techniques using progressively finer abrasives from powdered deer antler to silk char cloth, sometimes taking months for a single plate. Why would masters risk poisoning when traditional methods produced superior results? The answer speaks volumes about samurai values. True craftsmanship couldn't be rushed even if shortcuts existed. Yet the mercury myth endures because it serves a darker narrative purpose. Those stories of armor madness often emerged during political upheavals when explaining a rival's erratic behavior as supernatural punishment was more convenient than admitting human frailty. When the powerful Tokugawa Nariaki was confined for opposing the shogunate in 1844, rumors spread that his ancestral armor's mercury content had unbalanced his humors, a convenient cover for what we now recognize as bipolar disorder. Perhaps the most ironic twist lies in recent discoveries at Heian-era Castle. Conservators found a cache of 17th-century armor wrapped in mercury-soaked cloth, not for polishing, but as a primitive antibacterial measure during a smallpox outbreak. The very substance blamed for driving warriors mad was actually used to protect them. History, it seems, has a way of coming full circle, leaving us to untangle fact from fearful speculation, one gleaming plate at a time. The Meiji Restoration didn't just topple a shogunate, it shattered an entire cosmology of steel and spirit. When Emperor Meiji banned samurai from wearing armor in 1876, it wasn't merely a political decree, it was a cultural guillotine. Overnight, workshops that had honed sacred techniques for centuries found their craft reduced to relics. But what happened to these masterpieces of spiritual engineering? The answer is a haunting tapestry of loss, reinvention, and quiet rebellion. Take the fate of the Gosho Yoroi, the ornate palace armor worn by shogunate officials. As Western-style military uniforms replaced traditional dress, these suits weren't just stored away, they were systematically dismantled. lacquer was scraped off with bayonets to salvage the gold powder beneath. Silk cords became kindling. Helmets once consecrated by monks were melted down for bullet casings during the Satsuma Rebellion. A particularly chilling account from a Tokyo blacksmith's diary describes stacking disassembled armor plates like firewood, their sacred inscriptions ground into oblivion beneath wagon wheels. Yet some artisans refused to let the knowledge die. In hidden workshops, aging katchū-shi began crafting miniature armor sets, exact replicas at 1/3 scale, to preserve techniques without violating the ban. These weren't toys, they were time capsules. A surviving set from Kyoto contains a startling detail. The lacing follows the exact ritual pattern used for full-sized armor, right down to the ceremonial knot at the shoulder that traditionally held a warrior's ancestral prayer. The craftsman had painstakingly recreated every spiritual detail, as if the gods themselves might one day need reminding. Western collectors swooped in like crows, but they missed the essence. When American industrialist William Harding purchased 12 suits in 1882, he proudly displayed them as exotic curios in his Manhattan mansion. What he didn't realize was that the armor had been ritually emptied before sale, the interior prayers removed, the soul of the suit deliberately severed. Meanwhile, impoverished samurai families quietly sold heirlooms to buy Western clothes, often keeping just a single helmet crest as a secret shrine. A museum curator in Kanazawa once discovered a child's kimono wrapped around a 15th century cuirass. The mother had dressed the armor like a sleeping baby before parting with it. The greatest tragedy wasn't the physical destruction, but the severing of lineage. Without apprentices, masters took their most guarded secrets to the grave. The Nyoratate lacquer formula, the one mixed with human hair ash, vanished when its last practitioner drowned himself in the Sumida River, despairing at the new order. A Hiroshima art dealer's ledger from 1893 lists one armored corpse, likely a suicide who chose to die in his ancestral suit rather than face a world that no longer had a place for him. Yet from this wreckage emerged unexpected survivals. Buddhist temples became sanctuaries for condemned armor, their priests repurposing the suits as yoroi cannon, statues draping the plates over wooden bodhisattva figures to disguise them as religious art. In Yamaguchi Prefecture, farmers buried entire suits beneath rice paddies, marking the spots with cherry trees whose roots cradled the metal like protective hands. And when Japan's militarists revived samurai imagery in the 1930s, they unknowingly used armor pieces that still harbored their original spirits, a fact that gave pause even to hardline officers when a 13th century helmet in an Osaka parade spontaneously shed a single rust-red tear under midday sun. The Meiji era wanted to forget the armor's soul, to reduce it to mere decoration, but iron remembers, lacquer endures, and in quiet corners of modern Japan, craftsmen still hear the whispers of those who worked metal like it was a prayer, telling them that some bonds can't be broken by imperial decree, only waiting for the right moment to be reforged. Beneath the moonlit eaves of Edo Castle, a figure clad in full samurai armor moved with practiced ease, his shoulder guards creaking with each step, his helmet's crest catching the faint glow of distant torches. To the guards, he was just another warrior making rounds, but every detail was a lie. This was no samurai. It was a ninja of the Fuma clan, his stolen armor a perfect disguise, his true identity hidden beneath lacquer and silk. While samurai armor symbolized honor and lineage, it also presented an irresistible opportunity for deception. Ninja didn't just steal suits of armor, they weaponized their symbolism, turning the samurai's greatest pride into their most vulnerable blind spot. The most audacious example comes from the archives of the Koga Ryu Ninja School. During the tumultuous Sengoku period, a team of Koga operatives infiltrated Imagawa Yoshimoto's camp by posing as armor-bearing reinforcements from a distant ally. Their suits were genuine, plundered from a battlefield where the real samurai lay dead, but their knowledge of proper wear nearly betrayed them. one ninja's improper lacing of the obi belt caught the eye of a suspicious retainer. According to the Bansenshukai Ninja Manual, the operative saved the mission by coughing violently, claiming illness had forced him to dress hastily. The ruse worked, and that night the castle's eastern gate mysteriously unbolted itself for an attacking force. What made armor such an effective disguise wasn't just its visual authenticity, it was the psychological weight it carried. In an era where armor equaled identity, questioning a suit's wearer meant questioning the social order itself. The Iga ninja exploited this brilliantly during their infamous 1688 infiltration of Heian Castle. Disguised as low-ranking samurai from the neighboring Mida clan, they gained access by claiming to deliver an heirloom helmet, the real stroke of genius. They chose Sein-Ita, torso plates armor designed to be worn slightly askew for archery, knowing any irregularity in their posture would be dismissed as practicality rather than suspicion. By the time guards realized the Mida had sent no envoys, the castle's granaries were already ablaze. Forensic evidence confirms these tactics went beyond legend. A suit in Nagano Prefecture's museum shows telltale signs of ninja modification, its inner lining stitched with extra pockets for lockpicks and Mitsubishi blinding powder, the shoulder plates subtly filed down to reduce telltale creaking. Even the helm told a story. Infrared scans revealed remnants of a false topknot, likely glued inside to complete the illusion when viewed from guard towers. Most damning, the armor's Hishinui cross-stitching concealed tiny slits perfect for inserting poisoned needles into the fabric, turning every grapple into a potential death sentence. The ultimate irony lies in how samurai themselves inadvertently aided these deceptions. Many lords demanded captured armor be repurposed rather than destroyed, both for economy and to demoralize enemies by erasing their lineage. Ninja spies infiltrating armories would deliberately damage certain suits identifying crests, knowing they'd be relegated to low-status duties where scrutiny was minimal. A surviving inventory from Oda Nobunaga's storehouses lists 37 suits of Musho Mugon armor. Literally, no crest, no name, perfect blank canvases for impersonation. Perhaps the most chilling account comes from a captured Fuma ninja's confession in 1602. Under torture, he described how his clan would sometimes season stolen armor, burying it with rotting fish to simulate battlefield decay, then rescuing it from a fake grave to establish a cover identity as a disgraced Ronin seeking redemption. The psychological manipulation was flawless. What better way to explain minor breaches of etiquette than by posing as a broken man relearning his station? These stolen shells didn't just hide ninja, they hollowed out the very meaning of samurai identity, because in the end, the greatest threat wasn't the blade hidden beneath the armor. It was the realization that the symbols they'd built their world upon could be worn by anyone, and that sometimes the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one who refused to follow the rules, but the one who knew exactly how to fake them. In the dusty archives of a Kyoto monastery, a 16th-century scroll describes an encounter that defies historical timelines. A traveling merchant reported seeing a group of warriors in strange black armor, their faces hidden behind masks of iron, during the Heian period nearly 300 years before such designs appeared. This isn't an isolated account. Similar anomalies pepper Japan's historical records like stitches in a torn tapestry. A Nara-era painting depicts a court noble examining what can only be described as Edo period Sangu Shin guards, their distinctive overlapping plates unmistakable despite being painted 6 centuries too early. Could these be mere artistic errors, or is there something far stranger at work? The most compelling case emerges from the diary of a Portuguese missionary in 1542. Father Luis Frois recounts meeting a peasant who claimed to have found a helmet of futuristic make buried in a 12th century battlefield. The description matches the Kawari Kabuto style popularized during the late Sengoku period, except this artifact allegedly predated its own design by 400 years. Skeptics argue the peasant likely unearthed a later relic disturbed by erosion, but the diary specifies the helmet was nestled among authenticated Heian-era arrowheads, their corrosion layers matching the surrounding soil. Physics offers potential explanations. Quantum theory allows for microscopic particles to momentarily time-slip between eras. Could entire objects follow suit under rare conditions? In 1989, researchers at Osaka University simulated how certain metal alloys might theoretically resonate across temporal frequencies when exposed to intense electromagnetic fields, like those generated by lightning strikes near iron-rich deposits. It's a fringe theory, but one that gains eerie traction when examining the Thunder Armor Legends of Dua Province, where multiple accounts describe armor materializing during storms, smelling of ozone and warm to the touch despite the rain. Yet the most chilling accounts come from modern times. In 2005, a Fukushima construction crew uncovered what appeared to be a rusted Tosai Gusoku chest plate, a style developed in the 1500s, sealed within a 14th century temple foundation. More disturbing than its presence was its condition. The iron showed advanced oxidation consistent with centuries of exposure, but the interior padding bore traces of sweat and skin cells that carbon dated to the 1970s. As if the armor hadn't traveled backward through time but had somehow been worn in both eras simultaneously. Perhaps these anomalies aren't glitches at all, but evidence of a lost tradition. Fragmented texts reference Yoroi no Watari, the armor-crossing rituals performed by esoteric Buddhist sects. These ceremonies allegedly allowed adepts to send protections backward along the wheel of karma, shielding ancestors from battles not yet fought. Could what we perceive as time-traveling armor actually be deliberate spiritual interventions? The Yusugi clan's records speak of a mystic who buried 7 suits of future armor at sacred sites, vowing they would rise when needed. 7 times throughout history, generals reported finding inexplicably pristine armor before decisive victories, only for it to crumble to dust afterward. The truth may lie beyond our grasp. Like a helmet glimpsed through fog, these accounts remain tantalizingly out of focus, simultaneously too detailed to dismiss, yet too impossible to confirm. Whether hoaxes, hallucinations, or something beyond science, they force us to reconsider armor's role not just across geography, but across time itself. After all, if steel can remember the hands that forged it, why couldn't it occasionally forget what century it belongs to? From cursed suits that whisper in the dark to armor fused with the very souls of warriors, the secrets of samurai battle dress reveal a truth far stranger than fiction. These weren't just tools of war, they were vessels of belief, ironclad prayers hammered into form. Consider the blood-tempered chaitsu plates said to weep alongside their wearers, or the hollow Kawari Kabuto helmets that hummed with the voices of long-dead generals. Even the gold lacquer of shoguns held shadows layered with the breath of fasting monks and mercury, laced rituals meant to bind mortal rulers to divine will. What chills most isn't the supernatural claims, but how deeply samurai trusted these bonds. Whole clans bet their survival on armor consecrated with ancestors' hair, while ninja exploited that faith, slipping into stolen suits to turn sacred symbols into weapons of deception. And the legacy lingers. Modern craftsmen still hear phantom chanting when reconstructing lost techniques, as if the metal itself resists forgetting. Yet for all we've uncovered, mysteries cling like morning fog. Why do certain helmets still warm inexplicably during autumn equinoxes? How did a suit buried in the 14th century bear traces of a 20th century wearer? And what of the armor that allegedly foretold ambushes with groans like bending bamboo? So tell me, which of these secrets haunts your imagination? The spiritual armors that moved on their own, the lost techniques whispered only to initiates. Or perhaps the eerie truth that some warriors' armor outlived them so completely it became their ghost. Drop your theories below and remember, history's greatest puzzles aren't always found in scrolls. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight, waiting in the creak of old iron and the glint of lacquer under museum lights. The samurai new armor could carry a soul. The real question is, are we ready to listen?